You're listening to the Vent Podcast, where we bring you interviews and stories from around the world of wine and spirits. From winemakers and critics to sommeliers and master distillers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping the future of today's food and drinks culture. Enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Vent Podcast. My name is Billy, and you may notice Brady is not doing the intro. He is actually in Las Vegas this week and not able to join the recording. And he was also not available for the interview. So you guys get a whole episode of just me. But we have a really exciting episode for you nonetheless. We have an interview with Jermaine Stone, who has a fascinating wine background, was actually a guest that was recommended by my mom months ago. You guys will hear the story about that. His team reached out to us because he's coming out with a new wine and food show called Street Somm, in conjunction with Tastemade and Constellation brands. But we'll get into that a little bit more towards the end of this intro here before the interview. I'll give you guys more details on who he is and a little bit more about his background. Before we dive in, we can give you guys our standard fun wine updates. First, I've been traveling over the past 5 days as well. I was in Montreal and Vermont, which we've teased this. Brady was recently in Vermont as well. But it was my first time both in Montreal and going down to Stowe. And it was really interesting. I was blown away by the food scene in Montreal. We actually didn't spend that much time on the food and wine scene there. We went to an amazing little place, if you guys are in the area, called Le Vin Papillon. It was part of this other broader wine group of well-known restaurants that were pretty cool. And we went there and it was just like a little great French theme. It's in Montreal, so everything is both in French and English. But the wine list was amazing. It was just a great vibe. It felt like you're in a Paris little bistro wine bar. It was an amazing little spot there. And we went to a bunch of other interesting spots bouncing around. The town was just full of different pockets of personality that I wasn't expecting. So that was really exciting. And then we made it down to Vermont. Finally got to try some of our buddy David Keck, Master Sommelier David Keck's wines that he makes down there. Unfortunately, he was traveling and the tasting room wasn't open, but I was able to track some down to try. And again, it was really interesting to see the dynamic offerings of wine, both in restaurants, wine and spirits, actually. Wine, both locally grown and imported as well throughout Vermont. I think we were actually in a small town called Woodstock, which I thought we were actually visiting the place where the concert was. Turns out that was in New York. Please don't judge me. Turns out I was the only one who thought Woodstock could have been in Vermont. But we went to a cool little shop there and they had Patty Green and also, it's escaping me, but another excellent Oregon producer just available in this wine shop, mixed in with all of these other different wines. So it was really cool to see the thought and care that even in some of these small towns in Vermont, a lot of quality wines were available. And speaking of that, the one that I was most impressed with, we made a little stop. It was just south of Stowe. It's also just outside of Montpelier, to a little place called The Local. I think the website's The Local VT. So if you search that, you'll be able to find the wine shop. And it was really cool. I was able to speak with the proprietor there, Jack. He was really nice. But prior to even speaking with him, I just walked around the wine shop. I was actually looking for David's wines, which I found a couple bottles, which was awesome. Ended up buying one of them. And then, but as I was going around, there were wines from all over the world with a really diverse selection, from Beaujolais to fortified or sweet wines from places like South Africa. There was an excellent Barolo and Piemonte selection in general, but every region had really thoughtfully picked out bottles of really interesting producers as well. It wasn't just a mainstream smattering. So I highly recommend if you're in the area. Jack also let me know they do tastings. He showed me this really cool tasting room. So if you're in the area, whether it be Stowe and you want to pop down, or Montpelier, definitely stop by and see if they're doing any tastings, because it looked like a really cool tasting room and the wines were a great, highly curated selection. Can't recommend it more based on my experience there. So go say hi to Jack at The Local VT in Vermont. After you go visit Jack in Vermont, then you should drink some sherry. Yes, that is what we are drinking this week. I found a bar that had an extensive sherry and vermouth list, extensive by normal restaurant standards. So we went there and my fiance got a sherry. I ended up with another fortified wine it wasn't necessarily a wine, it was a cocktail. And I asked them to pick out something they thought was interesting based on certain parameters. And they ended up picking out something strange, but I was happy to have the sherry. And the waitress was very proud of their sherry list and asking us if places in LA had as large of a sherry list, saying that they were some of the largest in Montreal. So that got me kind of pontificating to my fiance about how sherry is underrated and how it should have more of a following. And with that, I wanted to have that be the wine of the week this week. I want everybody to, if you have any preconceived notions, some people think sherry is only sweet. I just want everybody to think about there's so many different styles of sherry, and dry sherry alone, there's 4 styles, including like Fino slash Manzanilla. That was basically a very like dry white wine that can almost be used with any meal. It's perfect with like almost all foods. There's Oloroso, which is nice and full bodied and nutty and almost caramelly on the nose, but it's also dry. So it worked really well. In Virginia Beach, where I grew up, they would also always have it with she crab soup. There's Amontillados and Palo Cortados that are still both dry, that also have a little bit of elements of both the Fino and the Oloroso. And of course, everybody is more familiar with the sweetened sherries, the cream sherries, the pale cream, medium cream. These are actually wines that are dry wines to begin with, whether the Fino or the Oloroso, and then they're sweetened with a sweetening agent. Typically, another sherry wine called PX, which is a wine that's basically Pedro Jimenez is a grape. They'll grow it. It'll get very ripe. They'll either leave it on the vine a long time, or they'll pick it when it's ripe and then dry it out on mats. And it creates a really almost like syrupy sweet wine. A lot of people even put that on ice cream, but then they use that very sweet wine to mix with either Oloroso to create the medium and cream sherries. And then the pale creams are actually made with a different kind of sweetening agent that doesn't have as much character, really. But so there you go. So you have some dry sherries, you have the sweetened ones. There are sweet sherries beyond even just Pedro Jimenez that are made naturally. They're harder to find. They're made from a grape called Moscatel. But anyway, we'll get into a full sherry episode down the line. I got myself a little excited there. But for today, let's get to our interview with Jermaine Stone. Jermaine has such an interesting story. He grew up in the Bronx. He wanted to be a rapper. He ended up working at different auction houses, and he ended up starting out helping with boxes and packing. And then he worked his way up and became very involved in heading up even like a director of operations. So he basically climbed the ladder, fell like up into wine, if you want to say fall. Basically, he started learning more and more about wine through just work, while still also maintaining his love of hip hop and all of that type of stuff as well. So what this let him do is he basically built this really prestigious career in wine. He ended up moving to LA after New York and helping Wally's start their auction program. Wally's is a very well-known fine wine shop out here in Los Angeles. And then he ended up continuing just to basically evolve everything that he's been doing and continue to create new wine focused projects. He has this wine podcast basically just called Hip Hop and Wine, or Wine and Hip Hop. Sorry, Jermaine, I got it backwards. Wine and Hip Hop. He started Crew Love Wine, which is basically a marketing agency or a marketing group that basically helps advise people on how to bring wine and hip hop culture together. And basically he's been promoting wine in such a unique way that he ended up connecting with Tastemade and Constellation Brands to come out with this new series called Street Somm, which is what I referenced earlier. And it's basically him going around the country, interacting with different chefs and people who are really integrated into the food world in different cities, and bringing wine along with him to share along in the journey. So he pairs wines that go well with the food that he's being introduced to, but he's basically helping you see a side of the city that you may not have seen otherwise through these chefs' eyes, through these chefs' point of view. And I've watched the first 3 episodes of New York and Savannah and San Francisco, and they're really unique. I've seen food shows on all those cities, maybe not Savannah actually. And it was a really interesting take. His personality is infectious. So you can check them out, Street Somm, on either YouTube or the Tastemade website. And I definitely recommend it. The episodes will keep coming out the rest of the season. I can't remember how many episodes there are, but there's 3 out right now. So you can basically catch up a little bit, and then you can be staying tuned for the rest of the episodes. But without further ado, here is Jermaine Stone. Hi, Jermaine. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, man. Pleasure's all mine.
Yeah, I'm not sure if your team let you know, but so I had first thought about having you on the podcast in a really interesting way. My mom sends to basically cut out newspaper articles. She lives in
Right,
Virginia. I live in California now. So rather
right.
than sending me links to news, she'll just cut them out. So every time I see her, she gives me a envelope of newspapers.
Like
And
current events back in the day, the current events homework.
Pretty much. Pretty much. So one day, one of them, she was like, there's this really interesting guy in New York who's like a sommelier and he's doing all this cool stuff. You should read. So it was you and my mom was like, this guy looks
That's,
really cool. You should have him on the podcast. So I carried that clipping around for months until your team reached out about coming on. So
that's so funny, man. Well, mom knows best. You know what they say.
yeah. So that
so,
that was
but
that was crazy. She was very happy to hear that it worked out. So
that's awesome,
well,
man.
cool. Can you? We gave a little bit of a background earlier, but can you just share with everybody kind of like who you are and how you got into the world of wine and how you started your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Grew up in the Bronx, New York. Definitely a product of my environment. Got into hip hop when I was younger and rapped all throughout my teenage years, right up until I was around college age. And, at the time, my parents were really on me about having a plan B other than just rap. So I said, screw it. I go to school and
Hmm.
literally just to shut them up, honestly. I love my parents, but that is ultimately why I did it. But my dad's the kind of person where if he's paying for school, he's pulling the strings. And I don't really like my strings pulled. So I decided to go to school at night and work during the day. And understanding I'd written out like a 5-year plan about what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it as my plan B, because if I'm doing something, I am going to do it well. So I did truly write out what my plan was. And it was a cool 5-year plan about, interestingly enough, owning a catering hall. That is originally what I wanted to do. And
Oh.
so I said, in order to do that, okay, I'm gonna need to go to business school so I can qualify for a loan, and I need experience. So let me
Hmm.
just find any office job I could find. At that time, it's tough you can't get an office job without having experience. So I said, screw it. I'll take any job I can find and work my way from the bottom of the company to just
Hmm.
work in an office. And it just so happened that the job I found, which fit those daytime hours I wanted, was at a wine storage facility, which was the fulfillment house for a wine auction house. And that's
Hmm.
Zacky's up in Westchester. And who knew that job would change my life? But I took this job still thinking that rap was my plan A. And although I was in love with hip hop, I fell out of love with the hip hop business and
Hmm.
fell in love with the wine business during that time when I was working in the warehouse. So my first job was shipping clerk, simply to do packing boxes, and just being in that environment, being around a completely different element from what I grew up in the Bronx, like really interested me. But not only that, my deep love for hip hop also made me feel like I belonged and felt comfortable in this audience, because so much of the stuff I was around and the stuff that I was experiencing were the things that rappers talked about in their records. I had Biggie talking about saying escargot, my cargo is 160. I'd be now in restaurants eating escargot. Or when he talks about being in restaurants with mandolins and violins, I'd be in restaurants where they playing these types of instruments. So it felt okay. I grew up into the lifestyle that these rappers are talking about, and it allowed me to feel comfortable. But separately, being in wine auction is a really interesting business because it's so relationship based. Deals come very fast, and you work with a really small set of clients. So you end up becoming friends with everybody. And you would think a young Black dude from the Bronx will feel out of place or be a little bit ostracized. But really what I found was so many people were interested by my background, because they, in that space, they didn't get the opportunity to hang out with dudes like me, one, or two, even find that guys like me were approachable. So it was
Hmm.
always a cultural revolving door where they were teaching me about wine and wine culture and vice versa. But separately, I was hanging out with millionaire collectors, best winemakers all over the world. And that's how I grew up. So throughout that time in wine auction, started out packing boxes. My last job was auction director. And after I left wine auction, I went on to begin my own consulting business, which is Crew Love Selections, where I started out actually servicing those same types of auction clients. My background in wine auction was in business operations, so that's why they called me the Wolf of Wine. I was like a fixer. I'm like the Wolf from Pulp Fiction, not the Wolf of Wall Street. Wolf from
Yeah,
Pulp
yeah, yeah.
Fiction. I was a fixer. When you run into a situation you don't know how to solve, I was a dude that you would call. After my time at wine auction, I just went on consulting in that same capacity. But one, I always had friends in both spaces. I never lost contact with all the people I grew up with. And so many of my friends I grew up with rapping went on to pursue professional careers and become like professional rappers and DJs. And
Wow.
I always had that connection with that culture. And I would still show up to the studio, hang out with my friends, see stuff. And I always wanted to find a way to bridge those worlds. I thought my friends are buying expensive bottles in the club. Why wouldn't they buy an expensive bottle in the store? And it is likely better quality and you can enjoy it the way that you want to enjoy it. So I wanted to find a way to bring that world together as a consultant, but I knew I needed to do that slowly.
Hmm.
So I started my podcast for really two reasons. One, to introduce wine culture to a new audience, but two, really to stay in front of my consulting clients.
Yeah.
As an independent consultant coming from wine auction, it's a super high-end business and it's expensive to market yourself in that space. If I'm not at wine auction, I'm not at those auctions. I'm not at the expensive dinners anymore. So how would I bring that audience to me? So I started Wine and Hip Hop podcast, which where on every episode, blend my favorite, on every episode, I would sit with different influencers from either the wine industry or the hip hop world. I would have them pick a song or a bottle of wine that was special to them. And I would pick a pairing which we would discuss on the show. So I discuss my reason for the pairing. They discuss their reason why that particular thing was special to them. So every episode we could have an organic conversation about wine and hip hop. And the thing is, I just need to stay in front of my clients' timelines. That was what the podcast was really about. And
Right.
I knew that if I was sitting, because of their relationships with me, I knew that they had some interest in hip hop. And if I was sitting with Dave East with a bottle of 90s Bordeaux, they're going to be like, oh, wow, this guy's drinking it. They're going to look at the Bordeaux, but be interested by the fact I'm doing with the rapper. Furthermore, the Dave East fans will see that and wow, Dave East is drinking wine and now begin to feel like they're a part of this. More so, people have to see, you can't hit the baskets that you can't see. So once you see something being enjoyed in the way that you enjoy it, you'll step in. So that was my start to Wine and Hip Hop podcast. And it's interesting because I started that to further my fine wine consulting, but really it's ultimately brought me almost completely out of that. Now I'm 100% doing content and hosting events and still doing some consulting, but in a much broader capacity. So it's a lot of fun.
Nice. Do you think, speaking of content more broadly, do you think like platforms with the rise of Instagram and I guess even like TikTok to some extent, like people are able to see like behind the curtain, like even with a lot of NBA guys are showing off like the bottles that they're drinking like at home in a relaxed atmosphere. Do you think that's encouraging some of this as well?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When you think about it, wine and food right now really is a cultural currency.
Hmm.
It's like the person who knows about the wine, that's the friend you want to invite out to brunch or invite out to dinner. The person who knows what restaurants to go to. It's cultural currency. And I think that the artists and basketball players and everyone that's bringing that on understands that wine now really fits into that part of the culture.
I love that. I love that idea of cultural currency. I'm gonna tell everybody that's what I bring to the party.
I try. I ain't got money. I got cultural currency. Can I pay your
Nice.
culture?
Oh, that's awesome. Well, all right. So then you started your podcast. You also did a lot of work on the West Coast, like at Wally's and helping start some stuff there in Los
Exactly.
Angeles.
Yeah.
That's that was awesome. So how did this brings us to what we really want to talk about today, which is your new series you're doing with Tastemade as well as in
Yes.
with Constellation Street Somm. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny because within that consulting space, Constellation was interesting. One of the companies I was consulting for, and I've been working with them since 2020. So it's beautiful to see that here in 2023, we were able to bring this relationship even to a much further place and a bigger platform.
Hmm.
But it's interesting because this is really where those two things intersected and branched off, because within itself, it's just amazing to be working with such huge companies. Like Constellation has been amazing and
Can you
really.
share a little bit more about Constellation? I think our audience is familiar, but like maybe throw out some of the brands that some people might know or
Yeah,
explain how big they
absolutely.
are.
So essentially, this was a collaboration with Constellation and Tastemates to create this studio to make original content around these great brands they have. So we're using brands like Robert Mondavi Winery, The Prisoner, Kim Crawford, Mayomi. These are Rufino. These are everyday brands that you're going to see. And an amazing piece about that is that this really allows the show to be relatable and attainable. These are wines that are available in your market. Like sometimes you can go to 10 different restaurants on one street and you'll find 20 different wine lists. You know what I'm saying? So it can be fickle. So if we want to bring people in and we want to make it approachable and attainable, the wine has to be attainable as well. So it's just
Hmm.
amazing to work with great partners like.
Cool. So like the show is called Street Somm. So what is the premise? You're going to these different cities and
Yes.
yeah, how
Yeah,
does it
yeah.
work?
I mean, it's funny because it really is who I am. I'm like a street sign, not quite a sign, but it's funny. So on street sign, I'm a traveling sommelier. I go city to city, linking up with different chefs in each spot, and they ultimately introduce me to the city through food. They each take me on like different amazing culinary journeys, but not just introduce me to the food. I also really get to know them, and honestly, throughout this whole season, I got to know myself a little bit more. It was
Hmm.
interesting, but yeah, it's getting to see each city in that way and getting to know the city through food has just been so fun. And it really is a show where you'll walk away not just more culturally rich, but smarter with regard to wine, because we got a great way about just like weaving the wine info in there and making it. Wine is really just another character in the show. It's called Street Sound, but it's not a show about wine. It's about culture, people, and wine is another character on the show.
Nice. I love that. All right. So is it also weaving in some of your love of like hip hop and music as well? Is that like as an element
Oh,
or?
oh, most definitely, most definitely. Everywhere I walk, there's gonna be a little bit of hip hop dripping in the room. That's also the fun part. I think that for someone like me to be introducing people into wine, it gives things a whole different perspective, because hip hop so much is American culture. Like when you look outside of the world and you say this person's dressed like an American, they probably got on a basketball jersey or something like that. It's just ultimately, I think that American culture has really been significantly influenced by hip hop. And with me, like how I talk, I even actually, there's an episode coming up in a few weeks where actually rap in one of the episodes.
Oh, all
I,
right.
I was actually rapping in the studio. I had Bun B from UGK. We did a
Wow.
one parent in the studio. So hip hop is all over that show.
Nice. Yeah, like I love the idea. I don't think anybody's really done anything like that in the US. There was one episode of something that Action Bronson did in Paris where it was a similar
Yeah.
vibe where he wasn't focusing on the wine as much. It was like introducing to the chefs and the people. And I was like, oh, why don't more people somebody should do this like in the US? And you go.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
you're on top of it.
Try.
Are you going to yeah, walk us through like a general idea of an episode. Are you going to like these chefs and like they're sitting down and they're cooking your food and you're like trying to bring wine around, or is it like trying to be like how would you pair this like weird thing with this cool wine, or what's it look like?
See, just like me, the wine just shows up. No. Really, each episode I get in and I link up with my host.
Hmm.
And we talk a little bit. They'll usually take me out to a spot, get a little bite to eat, get the palate wet, and then we would just head out. Usually we hit about 3 different spots each episode, and in each different location, there's always just some amazing dish that each different chef is introducing me to for each location. And I'll always have a pairing for it. You'll have a few opportunities to learn on each episode.
Nice. Did you get to pick the destinations, or were you hamstrung into where you needed to go?
No, I was a part of it. I was a part of it. There were a lot of conversations about where we were gonna go, but you throw your hat out there and you hope. But it's a big team of people. I was very very happy with the destinations we found.
Nice. Well,
I
taking a
was
little.
surprised by Savannah though. I have to say, when I saw Savannah on the list, I was like, huh, okay, I didn't really know. And actually, it's the episode that's coming out tonight. I'm not sure when this episode is coming out, but today's the second, and it'll be out tonight. But yeah, Savannah was an amazing surprise and one of the best food cities I've been to in my life.
Really, I feel like I keep hearing that from different people. Is it more just like the quality or the breadth of the food? Like, what was it that stood out to you the most?
You know what it is? It's definitely Southern food. You are in the South, you're getting shrimp and grits, but it's Southern food evolved. There's a lot of fusion stuff going on there that derive from classic Southern dishes. So it's just, and that's the thing. I did not see that coming. You hear Savannah, Georgia, you think one thing, you think the history, but it's incredibly diverse, and the food is a melting, super progressive and cool city. I'm excited for people to watch that episode.
Cool. Have you? So this is kind of like taking a step to the side, but I would love to hear more about like some of the mentors that you've had in your life, and then now that you have the podcast and you have a show like this, are you finding yourself mentoring like the next generation of folks trying to get into wine or trying to figure out a way to learn rather than just falling into it?
It's interesting, man. A lot of my mentors really lived in the wine business. I had so many great people that fostered me along. And my interestingly enough, my brother is not in wine, but he has absolutely, and still is my number one consigliere. He knows nothing about wine, but definitely assists in a lot of my decision making. My dad also is a guy raised in Jamaica in the 70s and limited education, came here to the United States, made it something amazing for himself. We've been through a lot of struggles. I saw him struggle, but I also saw him build an amazing business on his own. So it gave me the courage to be an entrepreneur. One of the things that I remember him saying to himself when he first started the business was like, if I could just hustle up enough to pay my rent, then I know I could figure it out from there. And I remember telling myself the same thing when I jumped off and started my own business. These are people and he's just like incredibly smart. Like he's a never say die person. Like he always figures out a way.
Mhm.
I definitely took a lot from him as well.
So have you seen? Well, that's awesome. So have you seen like with your like crew love and before even just going down like this the street Somm in your podcast, have you found people kind of like reaching out in a way, or I guess what has surprised you along the way? Have there been more folks, less folks, or is it like a different somebody like I've changed careers because of you?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Actually, one more person I got to give their flowers, man. Andre Mack. Andre Mack is the man. He's somebody I knew forever. I remember when I was in wine auction still, and he was just leaving per se, and we knew each other on Facebook. And then when we linked up, we were like, oh, yeah, it's the other black guy, because there was nobody outside in the small NYC space here. But I remember just him talking to me, coaching me along when I started to do some media stuff. Even like now, I could hit him up 1, 2, 3, and he'll give me advice on different things. But he was someone that was a major inspiration and told me how to move in this side of the business when it was really different. But to your question about other people reaching out, and I mean, it's amazing to see this stuff happen because now I've been in this side of it since 2016, doing content and trying to reach people. And I've seen people that I've started out in their wine journey. I remember in 2018, I did an Instagram live with Germany for about Riesling. And I was talking about Riesling's not just one thing, it's different levels of sweetness, and did like a wine and hip hop comparison. I said Riesling is Drake because it has so many different styles. You get sweet Drake, you get You get dry Drake when he talking that stuff.
Hmm.
So it was a fun thing. But then a guy reached out to me, and he has just continued his journey literally since then. Riesling was what brought him in. And to the point where now here in 2023, I was in Portugal a few months ago and just ran into him. He was out there studying wine and getting into it. This is a guy. So it's amazing to see that I could have created a passion so rich in this person that they would dedicate their vacation and go to another country just for that. And then
Hmm.
I'm going to bump into him. And everybody's going to Portugal right now for some reason. I mean, it's good. It's a fun place.
It
So,
is a hot destination.
yeah,
Where
man.
were you in
So,
Portugal? I have to ask,
uh,
just out of curiosity.
I was in Porto. Yeah,
Hmm.
I was in Porto, man. That was a fun trip. Had a little 2-hour ride up the Douro River. Went through a dam for the first time in my life, which was damn scary. Let me tell you. I felt like I was going into Batman's cave. Like it was so weird. Like one side closed. Weird. But yes, if you've never been in a dam, people, I advise it.
Nice. I have two things now: the dam, and then also go to the Douro, because I've done the south of Portugal and Madeira, but never Porto. So it's like high on my list. So,
Yeah, man. Porto was fun. And the food. Whew. Yo, the seafood out there. I had barnacles for the first time.
oh, there's meat inside of those.
Yo, they look like dinosaur feet. It's so
Oh,
weird, but it is delicious. You like pull it. It's like a shrimp. It tastes like shrimps. It tastes like evolved shrimps.
nice. Well, I'm sure. I mean, a lot of seafood is, if you just had to eat with your eyes, you probably wouldn't eat it, but it's always delicious.
Yeah, no, they are gross to look at. Delicious.
Nice. Well, mentioning Andre Mack, he was nice enough to join us on the podcast a while back as well, and it's interesting his take on things, and also like I used to work at VaynerMedia back in the day, and so Gary was obviously an early mover in terms of wine media, and then he's close with Andre, and it's kind of interesting to see how these folks basically, and I guess people like yourself too. It's like being your authentic self through wine is now like cool, and everybody's, oh, it's so great. But then like they've been doing it for so long before it was like that was accepted. Like it used to be ostracized. Like what is
Yeah.
it like now with that being like the hip thing in wine? Is just everybody
You
loves
know what? It's fun. It's fun because I'll go to wine tasting sometimes, and this is no BS. This has absolutely happened. Camo pants, construction Tims, hoodie, and it starts out with people looking a little weird, but then by the end of it, and you start talking, people know who you are. It's so fun. It. I always had fun to change people's minds, but to be able to see people's minds change right there is great. And separately, I mean, who doesn't like to see their haters wrong? That's always a little fun. And but at the end of the day, if someone was hating before, the best thing you could do is treat them with grace and bring them
Mhm.
along. So that's how I do it. But yeah, it's a lot of
Have you? We tend to, we always have to ask people about like the quote unquote like natural wine movement and stuff in general, depending on what it is. But like I live out here in Los Angeles, there's a bunch of these natural wine bars, and you see such a diverse like mix of folks coming in and drinking wine more. And I've seen a lot of them transition onto quote unquote traditional wines. Have you seen that at all in recent years help expand the wine scene?
Most definitely, for positive and negative reasons. I think that
Hmm.
there have been a lot of people that come into natural wine and say, "Oh, I'm going to drink natural wine because it's healthier." It's just like, it's just like you gotta like for me, and I was probably a little bit of a slow adapter because of the side of coming from wine auction, and I fell
Hmm.
in love with wine through old world wines, but I feel like the whole natural wine movement has, because it's such a free, it is a younger audience that brought it in. So it came in with a whole different energy to start. Shout out to my friends out there, Westside Winos. They got that new offhand wine bar, and they're all about natural wine. So I feel like that side of it has actually pushed to bring wine to a younger space overall and make wine more culturally relevant overall. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I it's been really interesting to see from my perspective. I've seen it bringing like almost like a little bit of a bridge to the more older world or traditional styles, because there will be like the crazy label bulk natural wine stuff, but then they'll also have these old world things that people are like, "What? This is natural wine?" It's like, well, yeah, they've always made it well, and then
Exactly. Exactly. So that was the thing. I felt like there was this kind of like mentality about, oh, if you drink natural, if you're not drinking natural wine, it's like people turn their nose up at people nowadays when they see them eating McDonald's. Come on. But I think that it felt like that a little bit at one point, but it's leveled out. It's leveled out. I like to see where wine is now, where people are just looking for something different. I think that
hmm
people are in a whole different space of exploring new varietals that they've never tried, exploring wines from different areas that they've never tried. So we're in a whole different place now. We're in an exploratory phase of wine. So we should use that to our advantage.
yeah, that's awesome. Like I got into wine. I was actually working in advertising in New York, like I was saying, and then I just started reading about it. I was like 27 when I really took it seriously. And so I always read about these obscure varieties, and I'm always like, I would look around and be like, why isn't everybody like, these sound great? Why aren't people drinking these? So it's like,
That's the fun part about it. That is the
yeah.
fun part. Have some fun with it. Try something different. But no, I think that now is the time, and people are coming out of the woodwork trying interesting stuff. Not all of it's good, but look, man, I love to be surprised. There's so many, and honestly, your palate changes over the years too. My palate still changes, still evolving. So I've been drinking now for almost 20 years.
And that's the funny part. I guess you've experienced this too. When you start interacting with collectors, when their palate changes, it's like, oh, now I have hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million of this one region. And I'm done with that. It's just, what are you gonna do?
Sell it at auction. Hit me up.
Yeah,
I got people for you.
nice. All right. So circling back a little bit, I guess. Well, crew. So you started your kind of brand Crew Love advising, or I guess consulting. How did that lead you to eventually partnering with Constellation, and what were you doing with them prior to starting Streets? And then I do have to ask, well, again, when we'll get there, Streets on like all the cities you go to, because I know they're
Yeah.
listed, but I think we should hit
Yeah,
on
yeah,
them.
definitely. Well, so with that, I was doing really I was the guy you call, put it to you that way.
The go-to
And
guy.
in that regard, you try to service people in whatever capacity they needed you. Now at the time, I was just wine enthusiast 40 under 40. And Constellation does a lot of really cool diversity initiatives within their team, educating the company on new aspects of diversity, teaching people different ways to think, speaking with a lot of things with like sales team, having different ways of approaching wine overall. So I do a lot of talks with them. They had a group called Ascend, which did a really cool thing for Black History Month. And that was when the relationship started. So it went from doing a couple talks at Black History Month to speaking at the national sales meeting and doing fun online activities with the group. So I was actually doing some wine and food pairing things and showing different ways to look at stuff. I was just a fun dude that would come around and introduce them to a different side of wine every once in a while.
Hmm. Cool. Has working with, and I'm sure you visited a number of the Constellation producers, and maybe even through like people like Andre. Have you caught any bug at all to want to try to make wine, or are you just purely on the enjoying and
You know
sharing
what,
side?
man? I have so much respect for winemakers that I know I couldn't be good. No, I mean, I've done things like help to blend and before and stuff like that, but being a winemaker is hard and you have to be extremely passionate about it. I remember when I was growing up, I wanted to be a basketball player. And I got on, you couldn't tell me I wasn't going to the NBA. I was that guy, fourth grade, fifth grade, junior high, get to high school, got on the JV team. And about a week in, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to rap because I just hated going to practice. Like
Yeah.
I realized I didn't love it enough. In life,
hmm
you have to know you can enjoy something, but if you do not love it enough, just do it for fun. You know?
Yeah. I think that's great advice. All right, so on the street Somm, so what are your routes? Yeah, what are all the cities you hit, and give us like a little bit of
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. I hit a bunch of fun cities. I was in, of course, we started off in New York, then Savannah, San Francisco, Chicago, Houston, and Miami.
Oh wow.
So we
So are
really
you
go on a journey. We go on a journey.
so is there like a specific wine or I guess set of wines, or is there a theme I guess for each city, or like how do you like decide on what theme, or is it
Um,
based on what the chef wants?
there's a bit of a story for each city because each city has, I mean, cities have a ton of characters, but each city has its a little something to it. So, for example, in Chicago, the theme was around art because there's a very rich artist scene in Chicago, which I actually had no idea about.
Yep.
Like prior to filming Streets, my only understanding of the Chicago art scene was the
The
museum scene in Ferris
and the
Bueller.
bean.
That was it. I ain't know nothing. I didn't even tired of being to art. Like, it was just Ferris Bueller. They was in a museum. That was it. That was all I
Mm,
knew. And but Jenny Vay is an amazing artist. She brought me through the city. Had a lot of fun. Great food and great art. But no, it was a very very good show. Very good show.
nice, nice. And then with San Francisco and I guess New York, were you hitting more of the not the stereotypical, but like the classic wine spots, or were you trying to do more like off the beaten path a little bit stuff
Oh,
there?
definitely. NYC, I was very happy. We popped it off on all levels. We hit 11 Madison Park. Um,
Wow.
amazing establishment. Did a great food pairing there. But we also had just like some shakshuka from a little Jewish spot in Brooklyn. Had a spicy fried chicken right in
Oh,
Brooklyn.
nice.
So some really, really cool stuff. But I mean, we're everywhere. In Savannah, we having a seafood boiling in the chef's backyard. With his neighbors coming over. We in Houston, we in the studio with Bun B eating fried lobster. So we do it's with this show, we want to help people understand wine has no boundaries.
I
The
love
only
that.
boundary that wine has is you. You are the only limiter. And guess what? It's not going to go too far and it's not going to be too reserved because it's you. Enjoy it how you want it. Bring it everywhere that you want it to be. Pair it with the foods that you like. The crust of the show is about breaking the conventional rules of how you thought you needed to approach wine and building new ones from scratch.
Nice. So are you guys like you're showing people you can drink it. You don't have to drink it out of a wine glass, for example, or you don't have to be all fancy about it.
Yeah, yeah. Nah, we don't do any street corners, but I mean we do some stemless. We have had some stemless in the show,
Going
but
crazy.
I do still try to make sure that we pay respect to wine culture. Ultimately, everything is there for a particular reason.
Hmm.
It's just making sure that it's a reason that sits well with you. Yeah, we do stemless, of course. The stem is on the glass to not throw up the temperature of the wine, but sometimes the risks are worth it. Sometimes you're not as pressed. Sometimes you gotta throw it back a little bit fast. So don't press rules. Do whatever you do what fits you.
Yeah. That's my main thing only, like, I'm not everybody expects me to be, like, particular, but I'm like, the only thing I really care about is the temperature, like you were saying. Like, if you it can just, like, drastically improve your drinking experience if it's if your white wine's not warm or whatever the red is, has if it's just right how it's supposed to be, you're gonna like it more. I'm just trying to help you.
Exactly. 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 So things exist for reasons. However, just make sure they apply for you.
Yeah. Well, we always have to ask, so you're saying how your interests are changing. What are you personally into drinking right now? Is there anything that's like just top of mind or one of your favorite wines? Regions?
Let's see. What am I drinking? Interestingly enough, and this is where sometimes I'll have cravings for wine and I'll
Mm,
taste a specific style, regional, varietal. But I mean, Merceau is my favorite style. It is my favorite area. So I love white Burgundy. I'll drink that all day, every day. But lately I've been craving some champagne. I woke up yesterday craving champagne. I need whoever's out there, please believe next time you see me and we drinking, it might be with some shit. So that's what I'm on right now.
Nice. Those are two things that certainly you can never go wrong with. I don't think anybody's ever.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining. I guess we can wrap up here. We're almost close to time. So do you want to say like how often do these episodes come out? Is it weekly? I know they started, I guess, on the 25th of September.
Yep. So start of September 5th, we dropping every Monday at 7 p.m. on Taste Made. Make sure you stream that. Man, I'm so proud of that show. It feels great. And I got recognized the other day randomly at a party, which means that people are watching it and liking it. I hope everyone goes out and enjoys it.
Awesome. Well, I have one more question I have to ask. What after this? What's next? What's next for you? Yeah,
man. Hopefully season 2. There's a lot happening. I'm actually heading to France on Thursday. I'm gonna be hosting a huge event at Clos de Vougeot.
Oh wow!
Mike D from the Beastie Boys is DJ, and he backing me up. And when I was in Houston in the studio on Street Somm, I did spit some bars. I linked up with a multi-platinum producer in there. And so people will get to see me rap on the show, but it sparked a bug. And so I am dropping a little 5-song EP, which will be out this fall. It might be out before the end of the month. Who knows? Who knows how I'm feeling? But yeah, doing a bunch of stuff. I'm all over the place. People can probably catch me at some events, and definitely every Monday at 7 p.m. on Taste Made Street Somm.
What are your social handles as well if people want to follow your journeys?
Yeah, at Real Wolf of Wine on Instagram or at Wine and Hip Hop Show. Either one of those. I really have a lot of fun on Instagram. So, people get an opportunity to roll with me. There's always going to be some dope music. So you can bet that. And I try to throw some funny stuff in there every once in a while.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. It was great to have you. And everybody, I'm really excited to go check out all the videos. Street Somm. Yeah, pretty pumped. So
sweet.
Thanks
man.
again,
Billy, thank you for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
All right. That was our interview with Jermaine Stone. Definitely everybody go check out Street Somm. And without further ado, I guess that's the end of this episode. So stay tuned for another interview next week, as well as Brady being back in the virtual studio. I will see everyone next week. Cheers.
To check out our current offerings and to sign up for the Vint platform, find us at www.vint.co. That's www.vint.co. For questions, comments, or feedback on the Vint podcast, please email us at support@vint.co. Vint and VV Markets are offering securities pursuant to Regulation A. Our offering circular as amended can be found on the SEC website. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Investments such as those on the Vint platform are speculative and involve substantial risks to consider before investing. We may provide communication that may contain certain forward-looking statements that are subject to various risks and uncertainties. Information provided in any communications, including this podcast, is not legal, business, or tax advice. All prospective investors should consult a legal, tax, or business advisor concerning the subject matter of any communications and any offering.